As an academic, one of the most surprising yet interesting moments that I have been encountering from time to time is when my peers or students haven't heard of an animal that I thought to be famous. One recent occurrence is when I found out my students haven't heard of Remora. I mean, a Pokemon is based on it, so I thought surely it's a popular animal, but apparently not. But of course, not everyone is into Pokemon, and when I think about it, it's also interesting how the way someone found out about a certain animal could vary a lot. For example, the first time I've heard of Remora is from a free picture book that I got from buying a milk when I was a kid. Though, remoras themselves have been written in stories and legends, dating back to at least 2000 years ago. Yep, you heard that right. 2000 years ago, back in the Roman imperial dynasties. They were infamously known as the ship holder, indirectly blamed for the death of historical figures such as Caligula. Now you might be confused and wonder, does that even make sense? How dangerous are they really? Well, let me bring up the question. What exactly is remora? First of all, if it's not obvious enough, remoras are fishes, ray-finned fishes to be precise. They are classified in the Carangiformes order, together with some famous fishes like trevallies and mahi-mahi. In case you are wondering why these three are classified in the same order, well, unfortunately, I couldn't give you an easy to notice diagnostic trait because it's mostly based on molecular analysis. That's how it is with a lot of fish groups. So let's move on for now. Remoras are classified in a separate superfamily though, which is Echinoidea, and in its own family, Echinaidae. The family name is taken from the first scientifically described Remora genus, which is Echinites, but there is a genus called Remora. So, in a scientific discussion, you need to specify whether you are talking about the genus or the whole family. In case you are wondering, Echinites means ship holder, because they were known to hold ships in place. Meanwhile, remora means delay, because they were said to cause delays to ships. Isn't it interesting how they were mostly known to stick to ships back then, while nowadays they are typically known to stick to sharks or whales? The advancement of scientific understanding and public perception is truly a wonderful topic to think about. But anyway, I've talked about two genera, but there is another one, which is Theirichthys. The name basically means parasite fish, because they stick to other fishes, but not necessarily a parasite. We'll talk about that later. In total, there are 8 species of remoras, 2 species in the Echinites genus, 5 in Remora genus, and 1 in Theirichthys genus. If we're talking about the whole family, they can be found throughout the tropical ocean, but can also be found slightly towards the temperate ocean. While some species are widely distributed, they do have their own niche, but we'll talk about that later. Before that, let's talk about their morphology. Remoras are medium sized, typically around 30 to 50 centimeters long, but some can reach 100 centimeters long. They have a pair of pectoral fins, a pair of pelvic fins, an elongated anal fin, caudal fin, an elongated posterior dorsal fin, and a highly modified anterior dorsal fin. Wait, anterior dorsal fin? Yep, it's actually the diagnostic trait of this family, the easily noticeable one, what's commonly known as the sucking disc. The idea that this disc is a modified dorsal fin had been around since 1822, but it was recently proven in 2012. How, you might ask? Well, by observing the development of their larvae. Now you might think, shouldn't that be the obvious course of action? Why aren't we doing that for the last 2 centuries? Well, the simple answer is it's simply difficult to do. Fish larvae are often so different compared to their adult form. Not only that, though, they are small. Even if someone found them, most won't even know what they are looking at, especially for remoras, because remoras are known for their adhesive discs, while the younger larvae don't have this trait yet. And keeping them in captivity is not exactly feasible because, well, first of all, they are marine animals, and second of all, their lifestyle is quite unique. Anyway, if you are interested in learning about this research, you could read this publication. It's not open access, so unfortunately, I couldn't exactly show you the content of this paper, but we could look at the general morphology of this disc instead. The rim of the disc is elevated, just like a suction cup. On the middle, you could see these transversal structures called lamellae. The left and right side of each lamella are actually discontinuous, separated by skin and connective tissues on the middle. Each lamella itself is pectinated, aka comb-like. You could see tooth-like projections when you look at it from another angle. These are called spinnules. Actually, the detailed structure is shown in this article, but again, not open access, not available in any public article that I could find, so cannot exactly show it in this video. But anyway, the structure varies between species, hence you could use this to identify species to some extent. Their overall form also varies between genus. The ones in Remora genus looks typical, normal, while echinites are slenderer. Theorichthys is even more slender. That's why they are called the slender suckerfish. Though, the difference between groups is not only shown on their morphology. Their lifestyle also differs, so let's talk about it. But before that, as I've said earlier, and as you might already know, remoras are typically hitchhikers. They use their adhesive disc to stick onto other marine creatures. While the general public typically associate them with sharks, they actually have various host preference. Well, some of them at least. Some species, especially those in the genus Echinites and Theirichthys, will hitchhike on a wide array of hosts, including sea turtles. Meanwhile, Remora australis strongly prefer whales, while Remora osteohere strongly prefers marlins. Their niche doesn't end there though. Different groups also have different habitat. To be precise, Remora lives in the pelagic, open water column, while Echinites and Theirichthys are associated with reefs. Oh, and also, while they are known to hitchhike a lot, they aren't necessarily obligate hitchhiker. They can also swim themselves, especially when, if you haven't guessed already, moving from a host to another host. You know, like changing bus or changing train. Though they are so specialized for hitchhiking that they lost their swim bladder, making them a very bad swimmer. Anyway, the shape of their adhesive disc is also influenced by their host. To be precise, the roughness of their host skin. But remember, they can stick to different types of hosts, which means they are still flexible to some degree. And how could that be? Well, let's take a closer look at the mechanism. So if you look at the disc itself, like I said earlier in the morphology section, the disc has multiple lamellae. Each of these lamellae can rotate to some extent because they have muscles. When latching to a host, each lamellae is angled to a certain degree. The rim or edge of this disc itself creates a suction seal, while the individually angled lamellae form multiple lamellar compartments, which is a suction cup in itself. Don't forget that each lamella is pectinated. The spinnules create friction with the host skin, so basically, they stick to their host by suction and friction. Now, underneath this disc lies a modified anterior cardinal sinus. To put it very simply, it's a specialized vein. It underlies 70% of the disc. The bulging of this structure helps in positioning and giving pressure to the lamellar compartments. Keep in mind though, the posterior 30% are not supported by this structure. And, according to this research, the posterior part does not create a full seal with the host surface, which shows the importance of the modified anterior cardinal sinus. So now, what if they want to detach themselves, you might ask? Well, they could just relieve the pressure on their lamellae, lowering them and practically removing the lamellar compartments. Quite simple, right? Not exactly easy to replicate though. Still, we have developed a biorobotic adhesive disc for underwater hitchhiking inspired by this mechanism. Still not perfect, but a good step nonetheless. Oh, by the way, some of you might wonder, if they are latching onto hosts most of the time, how do they reproduce? Do they detach themselves when they meet a suitable mating partner? Well, if you are wondering about that, me too. We don't really know anything about the reproduction. So a lot more to discover. Now let's talk about the interaction itself. What does the remora get from this? The most obvious one is conveniency. They can preserve energy by hitchhiking. Hence, of course, it's beneficial for the remoras. Another aspect, food. Remoras mostly feed on zooplanktons and copepods, but some say remoras also feed on the host's leftover and dead skins. Hence, beneficial for the remora. Yet another aspect, protection. Latching on a host could potentially deter predators. Hence, beneficial for the remoras. Those seems obvious. When reading articles about remoras, The interaction is often considered mutualistic. Why? Well, the argument is remoras eating parasitic copepods or perhaps dead skin will be beneficial for the host. Some articles stated it's commensalism, meaning it's beneficial to the remoras but the host itself is unaffected. However, what I would like to point out is most of these claims are hypothetical, not based on empirical data. Recent publications pointed out the hydrodynamic burden suffered by the host. Hence, you could argue the interaction is parasitic. There is also an article published in 2007 talking about the mechanical removal of remora by dolphins. My point is, the beneficial weight of the interaction might be case specific, or in this case, host specific, maybe even species specific. Now, what about ships? Remoras were infamously known to hold ships in place centuries or even millennia ago. Well, unfortunately, I don't really know the hydrodynamic of ships, so I couldn't really tell whether some remoras latching onto the hull could literally stop old ships. Honestly, I personally don't think so, but I'm definitely not an expert on this topic, so let's just move on. I want to talk a little bit about their evolution. Their closest relatives are the cobias, which is just a single species in its own family. When you compare them, you could somewhat see the resemblance. Looking back at this phylogenetic tree, it shows that remoras diverged at around late Paleocene, let's just say around 58 to 56 million years ago. However, the oldest remora fossils dates back to early Oligocene, around 30 million years ago, named Opisthomizon. We are sure this is a remora because it has the adhesive disc structure on top of its head. Keep in mind that the adhesive structure is not exactly on top of the skull, but right behind the skull. This supports the hypothesis that the disc evolved from a dorsal fin, moving forward over time as they evolve. Though, we haven't found the absolute transitional fossil between dorsal fin and adhesive disc, so who knows, maybe we will in the future. But that is remora. Most of my usual viewers might know a lot about this creature already. But hey, maybe some of you don't. Even if you do, maybe you learned something new about them. Even though we've known about their existence for a long time, like I said or hinted throughout this video, we still don't know much about them. Who knows what we'll discover in the future. But for now, let's just learn what is known. And that's all for now. Oh, by the way, remoras could also latch on to humans. Apparently it doesn't hurt, but sometimes they bite you once or twice if they are curious. Nothing serious but could be annoying. Anyway, enjoy your day.